And all of a sudden, a Roman soldier walked out of the wall holding a trumpet. Totally solid, but you could only see him from the knee up until he reached the level of the Roman road, and then you could see all of him. I lived in a haunted property in a place called Saxmundham, which was part of it, the 17th century. And the duvet was pulled off me twice in the night. And I think it was in the 50s a couple claimed to have witnessed a time slip of a battle between Romans and Celts. Like the modern buildings faded away. And they saw a woman in Victorian Edwardian clothing standing at the top of the stairs looking really angry, and she looked at them, so it wasn't a recording. She interacted with them and she looked furious, and it's because they were ripping old furnishings.
You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and now it's time for the Paranormal Peep Show.
Hi, welcome to the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and I'm here by myself, but don't worry, we do have a guest with us this month, and it's John West. And John is a prolific writer, author, film star as well, maybe I'll say that, and also articles for the Psychic News magazine. Welcome, John. How are you?
Hello. I've never been called a film star before, so I appreciate that.
Well, I think it's about time you did. Tell us a bit about your film work, as we're on the topic of that, first of all.
Yeah, the latest stuff. I played Berlusconi, the Italian Prime Minister, in a drama documentary about football. So apparently he was giving backhanders to footballers, so I just played him. I was in a film called Boudica. I played a Roman soldier who ends up ordering Boudica to be killed. I'm the one that orders her to be speared with this massive ballista. So I killed Boudica. And I've done films with a chap called Jason Figgis, a director I've worked with. I was in a film, The Ghost of Winifred Meeks. I played the landlord. I turn up at the beginning and the end. And that was filmed entirely in Suffolk. It's very much a slow burn film. So it's M.R. James. If you want loads of murders, it's probably not for you. But it is available to watch for free on Amazon now. I mean, it's about 3 different people have put it on there. And the woman that played the ghost, who was very good, she'd never done acting before, was my girlfriend at the time, Julie Abbott. So, but she's not my girlfriend now, so I shouldn't have dated a ghost, should I? Because it obviously doesn't work out.
Is that when you call it a bit part, because you're fading in and out, a bit part, you know?
That's it.
They pay half rates.
Very good, though. She was very good as the ghost, so I'll give her a due.
Right, and I thought that when you list on your thing that you do acting, I've done extra work, what they call, I mean, they don't call it extra work now, they call it background scenic artist or something, don't they?
Essays or, background artists.
Yeah. So did you start off doing that and then move into speaking roles, or?
Yeah, I mean, I still do a bit of that. I mean, obviously I was one of the leads in Ghost of Winifred Meeks, and I'm going to be playing Professor Parkin in an adaptation of M.R. James Wilson, I'll Come to You, me lad. But, I mean, the other people who played it's a bit daunting because John Hurt played him and Sir Michael Hordern. So I'm in good company, but I hope I'm as good as them, but who knows? But, yeah, so that's coming up. But I've done some essay stuff as well. I mean, the Boudica thing was, there wasn't any lines apart from fire, and I killed her. But, yeah, it's enjoyable. I love it. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to the M.R. James one. That'll probably be next year now. But I actually was promoted. I was going to play the ghost, and Jason Figgis, who's doing the adaptation, wants me to play Professor Parkin, who finds this whistle and unwisely blows it and summons up a ghost.
Right. And is there a lot of lines to say in that one?
Yeah, probably. They might have some overdubs as well, or whatever you call them. So, but yeah, there'll be a few lines and that. I don't actually know exactly how he's going to write it, but I'm sure it'll be fab, and I'll just have to learn me lines.
Yeah, I mean, when I did school plays, I always had trouble remembering my lines, and this is why since then I've anything to do with film or TV, I've tended to work in the background on the sound or vision or something like that on the technical side of things. Even doing artwork, I've done artwork for theatres because I do artwork and stuff. I'm much more of the creative type rather than a performance type. But having said that, I've been in rock bands and things like that. But
Have you? All
a
right.
different kettle of fish, I suppose. A different
Yeah.
sort of performance. But we do have a thing in common as well, which
What's
is the
that?
interest in the paranormal. And you've written
Of
some
course,
books, and I've
yeah.
written some books. So,
Yes, you have.
yeah, I've written True Tales of the Paranormal, which I will. I'll show you a copy of mine, and you can show me yours. Hang on a second.
I beg your pardon. I'll get my book now then.
Okay. Slight
Star Trek. I like your T-shirt. I've got a ghost
Oh,
one.
Oh
Paranormal.
gosh. Yeah, so that's True Tales of the Paranormal. That started off life as a book called Encounters with Fairies, Ghosts and Spirits, but the publisher decided to change the name. So we went with that.
Publishers. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. They have all these ideas, don't they? So
Yeah.
they had
Some
a
of them are good, and some of
Yeah.
them are not.
they had a book parked in their inbox, as it were, called True Tales of the Paranormal, but they had no one to write it. And then my manuscript arrived at the time, and it kind of dovetailed neatly into their project. So with a few changes, that's how that book came about, basically.
All right.
So how did you get involved in ghosts and the paranormal?
Well, that was my mum's fault. She was fascinated with ghosts, and she had loads of paperbacks that I had to look at when I was a kid, and I was fascinated by the covers. Wispy, attractive Victorian ladies, phantom monks. There was one with giant spiders on the front, which was probably the ash tree, M.R. James. And I was hooked. And then my dad, he bought me some books on ghosts. That one, Mysteries of the Unknown, which was fascinating. It's recently been reprinted as well. And also that one, Haunted Houses and Ghosts and Spectres.
Yeah.
And that really fueled me interest. And my dad got me books on by Peter Underwood, Andrew Green, and but the catalyst was my mum with her books, and then it led from there. So yeah, it's me parents basically, and I grew up watching the Ghost Stories for Christmas on BBC, the M.R. James adaptations, and it was a Dickens one, and yeah, I've loved it ever since. And I never thought I'd end up sort of making, shall we say, a living out of it, but I now write for Psychic News magazine. I've got 3 books out on ghosts. This is the latest one, ladies and gentlemen, Britain's Haunted Land.
Wow, I like the cover.
Yeah,
It's a Green Man type of figure, isn't it?
That's it. Jason Figgis designed that. He's a very good designer. And actually, in the top 40 best-selling books on the paranormal, I'm the only author with 2 books in that list, which is
well,
quite
that's
nice.
something, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
have you been one of these type of people that goes out on ghost hunts where people do these all-night vigils with, sort of ghost detector machines and things like that?
I've been on the odd one, but I tend to do my investigations on my own, and I'm not really one for using this equipment because half of the time you don't know if what it's picking up is actually genuine paranormal activity or just something else. So I've visited tons of locations on my own. I've experienced the odd thing. I went to Borley Church and, suddenly had this feeling of intense fear in a certain area. And then when I was going up the church path, and then I sort of walked out of it like it was a zone of fear. And then I walked back into it and then felt really scared. I lived in a haunted property in a place called Saxmundham, which was part of it was 17th century. And the duvet was pulled off me twice in the night, which is a bit scary.
Yeah.
And but then the activity decreased because I've often found when you move into a haunted location, when I've interviewed people about it, the activity sort of increases and then it sort of, decreases as if the spirits have got used to you. But I have been on the odd ghost hunt, but, without naming them, nothing really happens. So, they claim things happened, but I must admit I was a little bit, well, I wasn't impressed, shall we say.
Yeah, I must admit, I've been one to avoid the ghost hunt simply because of the fact that, you're going out in the peeing rain or in the cold and it's like, I'm pretty convinced there's ghosts. I don't really necessarily have to go out to a graveyard to see them. And my argument is always, I think the spirits have long gone from a graveyard. You might see something like a ghostly activity, not necessarily of a spirit, but of a ghost. And that's an important definition, I think. I mean, what would you say? I mean, I kind of cover it in my book as a definition of a spirit is a person like our souls that when they end this life, they go on to a spirit world of some kind of new existence, and they're in their next transition of life, the next phase of life. But ghosts, I explain, based upon the sighting, certainly seem to be. I mean, some people talk about a stone tape theory, which is a kind of idea recording on the atmosphere that's picked up by sensitive people. Others have said that they're psychic impressions that are picked up by sensitives, mediums, psychics, that kind of thing. And they might be tapping into a reservoir of history. Again, a similar thing to a recording. And other people think they're viewing time slips or something. But I mean, one of my favorite ghost stories is the one of York, which is Harry Martindale, which was the plumber.
I've written about it.
Yeah, which is, well, I mean, you can tell us because you're the guest, so I'll let you tell us. Do you just want to refresh people who Harry Martindale was and what his story was, and then maybe you could explain what you think are ghosts and what your take on them is?
Certainly. Well, I'll just give you a little bit of background. This happened in York. Now, York was a Roman foundation. It was a Roman fortress of the 9th Legion and then the 6th Legion, and it was also a colonia, which is basically a civilian settlement. Roman citizens lived there. There was only 3 known in Britain, and that was one of them. And so at the end of the Roman period, Roman rule collapsed, and the 6th Legion pulled out, and then it became a Viking city, medieval city, and it's a major tourist attraction today. I mean, I'm going up there later this year to film a TV pilot. I'll tell you about that later. But anyway, 1953, Harry Martindale was an apprentice plumber, and he was working in the cellars of the Treasurer's House, which I've been in, which is a big medieval building near the Minster. And it was actually built in the Roman fortress. A part of it was built over a Roman road, an internal road in the fortress called the Via Decumana. And he didn't know this, but the archaeologists had excavated a section of the road in the cellar and he exposed it. Now, he was working down there on some plumbing. First day, nothing happened. Second day, he was tapping away on the walls and he heard a trumpet blast. And he didn't really think anything of it. He thought, oh, it's probably someone upstairs, because the Treasurer's House is open to the public. It's now owned by the National Trust. But he carried on working. And then he was on a ladder at the time as well, because he was up near the ceiling. And all of a sudden, a Roman soldier walked out of the wall holding a trumpet. Totally solid. But you could only see him from the knee up until he reached the level of the Roman road, and then you could see all of him. Well, needless to say, he was very surprised at this, and even more surprised when after this Roman soldier with a trumpet was a Roman soldier on a horse. Nothing like the sort of stallions that you see in the Hollywood movies, you know, Russell Crowe riding them or Charlton Heston. It was like almost like a Shire horse, you know, with, you know, hairy feet and, you know, very stocky, and a lot smaller than sort of modern horses. And then this went through, again, totally solid. And it's followed by 20 Roman soldiers marching double file. And again, couldn't see him from below the knee until they reached the hole. He could hear them murmuring. Obviously, he couldn't understand what they were saying. He fell off the ladder. He was that scared, and he crawled into the corner because he thought, God, what happens if they see me? But they never showed, they didn't seem to be aware of him, shall we say. But the thing that struck him was they were nothing like the Roman soldiers depicted in films and books at the time. They were all square-jawed in the films, rectangular shields, clean-shaven, immaculate, wearing red uniforms. These were total opposite. They were unshaven, they were very short. They didn't look anything like Charlton Heston for a start. And they had oval shields, and they had green uniforms, and these short-looking daggers, swords. So, and he couldn't understand this because he'd been brought up with this, you know, the history that they didn't look like Romans as he imagined them, which would suggest that if he was going to fake it, he would have described, you know, the ones I've just described, you know, red uniforms and that. But anyway, these Roman soldiers carried on walking, went through the other wall and vanished. So he legged it out of the cellar, and he bumped into the chap who was running the Treasurer's House. And the chap said to him, "Oh, by the look of you, you've seen the Roman ghosts." And Harry Martindale apparently swore at him and said, "Why didn't you tell me they were down there? I'd have never have gone." Well, he was that shaken that he left the job. And there's actually records that he went to see his doctor and got signed off. And he kept quiet about it until the 70s. And then he became a York Minster policeman, because the York Minster has its own police force. And because in the 19th century, someone tried to burn it down. So after that, they brought in their own police. And they still exist to this day. And he told someone about this experience and said, "Oh, of course, don't tell anyone." Because this person did, went to the press, presumably made some money out of it. And because it hit the international news, and he was interviewed about it. And he said, "Yes, I did see these soldiers. I'm not going to deny it." And he was interviewed by archaeologists who tried to throw him about what he'd seen. And he stuck to his story. No, they had oval shields. They were short, hadn't shaved. They were green tunics. And it turned out that was actually accurate. In the later Roman period, the Roman army had changed their uniforms and did have different coloured tunics and oval shields. Or the other theory is they were auxiliary soldiers who weren't Roman citizens, but again had their own uniform because the Romans recruited them from their lands that they conquered. So, and then it turned out it was a lady called Joan Mawson. She came forward. She'd seen the Roman soldier ghosts in the 1950s, in 1957, I believe. And her dogs had seen them as well and reacted really badly, again in the cellar. And her daughter had often heard a trumpet being blown and didn't really think anything of it. So, it hit the headlines. It became it's now one of the most famous ghost stories ever. The cellar was open to the public, and I went down, and I must admit I didn't experience anything. Although I did see the Roman road, and I was hoping, please, Roman soldiers appear, but they didn't. And they've never been seen since, I believe, the 50s. I haven't managed to find anyone who's claimed to have seen them since then. There's the odd psychic medium who's claimed to have picked up images of them, but obviously that's in their own mind's eye, and you don't know whether they're expecting to see them, so they imagine them. But the thing is, the cellar was altered later on, and I've found with some hauntings that when you alter a building, you do building work, it can almost, erase a haunting, shall we say. And although the ceiling was changed and that wasn't, part of the Roman road, perhaps was the ceiling constructed out of Roman stones? And my theory is that they weren't actually ghosts, that somehow he activated a recording and it replayed for him. And whether it was the intense emotions, was it like the last Roman soldiers leaving the fortress at York after the Romans had been there for 350 years? And were they feeling depressed, anxious? They were leaving their loved ones. They'd been ordered because they had families there, and they were going to the continent to an uncertain future. That is my theory. I don't believe they were conscious entities. I believe they were literally just a recording that Harry Martindale activated. I should also point out in the 20s, a Roman soldier was seen in Treasurer's House when he was still a private property. There was a fancy dress party, and this lady went off for a wander, having a look round, and she was shocked to see a Roman soldier who barred away. Now, this seemed to interact with her. So, that's different to the other haunting I've just described. But she went back to the owner and complained and said it was that rude person dressed as a Roman soldier. And I bet you know what I'm going to say. There was no one at the fancy dressed like a Roman. So that's a really famous story. But there are other Roman soldier ghosts in York. The Roman baths, which I'm hoping to film in for this TV pilot, that's supposedly haunted by a Roman soldier. And I think it was in the 50s, a couple claimed to have witnessed a time slip of a battle between Romans and Celts. Like the modern buildings faded away, and it was like before the fortress had been built. It's obviously, there might be some Roman soldiers still around. But anyway, that's my take on what it possibly could be. I think it was a recording.
That's interesting. Very interesting explanation. Now, the accounts I read said that Harry Martindale saw the Romans, like you say, he saw them there, the stubble on and things like that. He also heard them speaking as well.
Murmuring, yeah. He couldn't understand.
Yeah, he couldn't understand what they were saying.
Latin, yeah.
And then the lady you mentioned sort of 5 years later in 1957, who I think she was like the housekeeper or something like that, looking after
She
it's like a
was.
caretaker.
She lived there. Yeah.
She lived there and she was checking all the rooms at night and the dogs were barking. So she looked down the cellar, and although she saw the Romans, the description she gave was slightly different from the original sighting of Harry Martindale, because she said, I think Harry Martindale sighted one or two horses, but most of them were on foot. But these
Only
ones,
saw
there was
one.
loads of them coming in on horses or something.
Yeah.
And they appeared to be asleep on the horses,
Yeah.
as if the horses were marching them home, and they were so knackered, these poor Roman soldiers, that they just fell asleep on the horses. So, I'm wondering, was it a recording? Because I'm assuming that if you watch a recording, you'll see the same recording replayed, unless, of course, it's a different episode as such that is a recording.
Or it just stopped before these other soldiers
It
appeared.
could be. It could be.
Yeah.
My theory was, is that because there's a lot of people talk about the stone tape theory, and it came to light to me not that long ago that it was actually like an invention. Whether it was inspired by real research, I can't say for sure, but the invention of the stone tape theory came about because it was featured in something called Play for Today or something like that. I
The
remember
TV
those as a
show.
kid.
Yeah.
When it was written as a paranormal subject within a TV play sort of thing of ghost researchers, the idea was that the atmosphere of a castle or something will record ghosts that are replayed at a later date. And lots of people have latched onto that, not realizing the origin of where it's come from, that particular thing. And so now they kind of apply the stone tape theory to lots of sightings of ghosts and things. But I actually wonder if the Roman ghosts of York were Harry Martindale, who saw his, I think it was like in the November of 1953, and that February, sorry. And then it was the lady later on in 1957. She saw hers in November, or the winter months anyway. And they both described them of having mud splatters. Yeah, they were both done in the winter months, the sightings by Harry Martindale and the caretaker lady. And they were covered in mud each time, the Romans were, which suggests to me that they were in their winter time of whenever those actions were recorded or featured, if you like, in some way. And so I wondered if they were looking back at a kind of simultaneous time that was occurring back in those winter days of that Roman Britain back then. If Harry Martindale ceases on November the 1st, 1957, it's November the 1st, 100 AD, back in those Roman times, and he's seeing them on the same day, probably about the same time, and they're literally looking through a window across time.
Time slip, yeah.
So if it was a summer's day that Harry Martindale happened to be working in the Chancellor's House, he might have seen less muddied Roman soldiers who were in a sort of summertime attire with no mud on them, because it wouldn't be wet on the ground. That was just my theory or something like that. I mean,
there are various theories about it. I mean, some people believe they were real ghosts, they were spirits, time slips, the stone tape theory. Some people have said he made it up and the other woman latched onto it for the notoriety. So, I mean, but he always stuck to his story, and I never met him, sadly. He passed away a few years ago, but I did meet someone who'd spoken with him, and he said, look, the guy was on the level. Why would he lie? He never made a fortune out of it. He didn't write a book about it. Yeah, for years, he wouldn't even appear on programs to talk about it. So it wasn't as if he wanted the fame. So, but yeah, we'll never really know. I mean, as I said, the ghosts haven't been seen for years. I was told an academic had apparently seen him in the 40s, but I've never been able to find out who that was, what they exactly saw. So that could be just a rumor. But certainly, apart from people claiming that they've had a sense of Roman soldiers down there, no. I mean, I actually asked someone in the Treasurer's House, has anything been seen? And she said, look, I've been in that cellar loads of times. She said, I've never experienced anything, in winter, summer, spring, autumn. So perhaps it has, fizzled out, or, if it was a time slip, the window is closed forever. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that they've done building works and things since that time. And I actually wonder
Yes, they have.
if a bit like feng shui type of thing where you move furniture around the house to let the energy
Mm,
flow, that
yeah.
a similar things happened in this building, and the building was acting almost like an amplifier of sorts to amplify these signals in some way. And once building works happened, it's kind of decreased that ability for it to function. In
Yeah.
the same way that people talk about poltergeists,
Mm.
when a lot of people move into a house, they start to stir up trouble once they start ripping out things and decorating things, and that's when the activity starts to appear.
That often happens. I spoke to a lady in Saxmundham because I used to live in Saxmundham, place in Suffolk, and they were doing up their house, and I think there's like Victorian. There might have been a bit that went back earlier than that, and they saw a woman in Victorian Edwardian clothing standing at the top of the stairs, looking really angry, and she looked at them. So it wasn't a recording. She interacted with them, and she looked furious, and it's because they were ripping old furnishings that were from the Victorian period.
Wow.
So for some reason, that spirit had been hanging around and didn't want those changes. So that definitely wasn't like a stone tape or even a time slip because she interacted with them. So it wasn't, and unless it was a time slip and so who the hell are these people in my house? But she was conscious of them and they were conscious of her. So that obviously wasn't a recording. But she sold the place and she said, "Oh, never name it." She said, "Because if the people buy it, find out it's haunted." And I was never able to speak to the people who moved in because how could you actually ask them? By the way, have you seen the old Victorian or Edwardian lady on your stairs? It might, especially as they got young kids as well. It might,
Oh God,
keep quiet about that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting actually mention Edwardian lady because the one of the people that's involved in our channel that runs the Paranormal UK radio network, which we're part of, called Irene Ann Block. She said that she was looking round a house with her son who is intending to buy it, and so she decided to walk up the top stairs and went into the very attic room at the very top, and she came face to face with a Victorian maid who looked really shocked at seeing her, and she went like that. And obviously Irie went like that. And then this lady in Victorian maid's dress sort of just faded out. So again, there was an interaction, and it's almost like two times of visiting each other almost on a physical but temporary basis or something.
Well, perhaps that Victorian maid went and told her mistress, "My God, I've just seen a ghost upstairs wearing a woman wearing really odd clothing."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and then she probably got the sack for it or something.
Yeah.
Oh, you've been drinking on the job.
Yeah. I mean, it
Um,
might explain these UFOs that people wonder if they're visitors from the future or something, you know.
Yeah. Well, Rendlesham Forest, which is near me, some people claim that they're people from the future, not aliens. So yeah, there's different explanations for all these things. I don't think you can basically say that ghosts are one particular thing. I think there's ghosts are many things. It's like poltergeists. So there's different explanations for different hauntings. You can't put them all into one box, shall we say, and say this is what they are, and we're going to label them now.
Today's the best day of my life! Woohoo! Listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Join Andy and Neil every month on the Paranormal Peep Show, part of the Paranormal UK Radio Network, for fun, frolics, and lots of information about weird stuff, UFOs, ghosts, and things that go bump in the night and everything associated with them. Fascinating guests, fascinating talk, fascinating information.
Right, welcome back to part 2 of the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and I'm here with John West, and we're talking about Roman ghosts, poltergeists, and all other kinds of paranormal phenomena. So we were just talking a little bit there, John, in part 1 about the poltergeist activity. Do any of these Roman ghosts appear to engage with the viewers in some way on a kind of level that a poltergeist make, or do they appear just to be neutral observations that they're going about their daily tasks as they would have done?
Yes, I've never come across anywhere the Romans have interacted, these ghosts, with the observers. So again, is it a time slip or just a recording? So I mean, for instance, there's a case on Hadrian's Wall where people have claimed to have seen a Roman soldier standing literally about 10 feet in the air, presumably on the line of the Roman wall, which has since vanished, near Houndstead's Roman fort. And also Bird Oswald Roman fort, which is to the west of there in Cumbria, is also apparently haunted by a Roman soldier. People have claimed to have seen it in the old farm buildings, which is now a museum. But again, it never interacts with anyone, so it doesn't appear to be aware of them. So again, is it a recording or a time slip? So, but I've never met any Romans yet that have actually spoken to me or met anyone who's seen them like that.
I'll come back to that point of the Roman on the invisible wall in a second. It just reminded me about a year ago, I was speaking to a lady here in Dorset who said that her husband and her daughter were coming to pick her up from the local hospital. And as they drove around the road to come pick them up, she said he nearly ran into about 10 Romans crossing the road. But like Harry Martindale, these Romans appear to be nothing from the feet down. Sorry, from the knees down. They appear to have no legs. But he put on the brakes automatically, as you would do when you see a load of people walking in front of you, and realised they must have been ghosts. Fortunately, because his wife was a spiritualist and she's into mediumship and he kind of understood what was happening. But it wasn't just him that saw it; it's his daughter as well. And I think the husband's passed on. But I did ask the lady if I could get an interview with the daughter, and she said, "Oh no, she won't give interviews." So unfortunately, I'm stuck with just her sort of third-hand information. But interesting as it seems, and I did look into it, and there have been a few Roman kind of forts and constructions in the area, so maybe they were associated with that. But they obviously were not aware of any vehicles, certainly from the 20th century or 21st century, about to drive into them. So getting back to the Roman soldier on top of Hadrian's wall, it's interesting that the wall section that he would have been appearing on from his time was not visible anymore because it's fallen down. And yet the Roman soldier still appears to be standing on it. And so you think, well, maybe that's because he's a living being or was a living being, whereas the stone wall wasn't. But then you've got to think about, well, hang on, he's wearing presumably armor and clothes or some sort, they're not living. So it makes you wonder what part of the ghost or something is created for the effect to happen. I mean, we talk about ghostly carriages and ghostly horses. I mean, we've had the horses with Harry Martindale, but how far does the ghost phenomenon to stretch? Does it go into objects? Can you get ghostly carriages and things like that?
It's like phantom ships have been seen. And ghostly cars. There was one on the Isle of Skye that was seen before an accident involving a car that matched the description of the car that they'd seen. So that was like a ghost before something happened. But there was never anyone seen in the car. So yeah, I mean, as I said, there's various explanations to what's happening with ghosts. There's not just one explanation that fits all. And talking about the Roman soldiers as well, St. Albans, which in Roman times was called Verulamium, was actually sacked by Boudica during the rebellion in AD 60-61, when she burnt the town to the ground and massacred the inhabitants. That's also haunted by Romans. The Roman theatre, which you can visit, people have claimed to have seen on what was the stage area, phantom Roman soldiers, phantom Roman dignitaries. So a woman claimed to have seen that. She claimed to have seen someone dressed like a Roman senator or a magistrate, in his finery. And also there's the foundations of, I think it's the London Gate. There's a stretch of Roman wall in the old park area, which you can actually visit. And this one actually is different to what we talked about before. This is the only one, it's just came back into my mind, where the Roman seemed to interact with the observer. He was with, I think he was an academic. I can't remember his name offhand, but he was with some friends and they were looking at the ruins of the gate. And literally it's only the foundations. There's nothing there that's impressive. You haven't got when you go abroad and you see the massive towers still standing. Literally it's just the flint foundations. And he was described as going into a trance by his friends. And he claimed to have seen a Roman charioteer coming out of the gate, and the horses seemed to observe him and reacted badly and refused to move forward. And the Roman charioteer didn't see him, but kept whipping them to get them to go forward and was shouting something. He couldn't understand what he was saying, to get the animals to move forward, but they could see him and wouldn't go forward.
That's interesting.
And then, boom, they vanished. So was that literally a time slip that those horses, they saw this, what they was, some strange figure in front of them that clearly terrified them. And a lot of people believe horses are psychic, but the charioteer couldn't see him. And then it went back to normal and that was it. But that's the only time I've ever heard of anything being seen on the site of the gate. But again, the theatre, a few people have claimed to have seen things there. So it might be worth, if you're ever in that area or your listeners are in St. Albans, pop along there and see if you spot anything.
I remember going there. I mean, I've been to St. Albans since, but I remember going round the ancient parts of Verulamium or St. Albans on school trips because I didn't live that far away. I lived in Charlton St. Peter in Buckinghamshire. So it would have been about 40 miles up the M1 or something like that to get to it, I'd imagine. So if there's plenty of Roman ghosts appearing in Britain, do we get incidents of Roman ghosts appearing in Italy, predominantly Rome?
Well, I've heard of tales where people have claimed to have seen Roman soldiers. Hadrian's Villa, people have claimed to have seen figures there. So, I mean, you've got to remember that the Roman culture was around for centuries. I mean, they occupied Britain for over 350 years, and a lot of Western European civilization is based on Rome and Greece, because the Romans took a lot from Greece, the architecture, things like that, the gods, although they renamed them. So, they were around for a long time and they have influenced us. So, yeah, I've mainly studied sort of the British sightings, but I am aware that people have claimed to have seen Romans abroad, across what was the empire.
Yeah. So really, there seems to be a predominance of Roman ghosts simply because they were a large kind of, like you say, empire at the time. Is there any kind of like research done into it, do you think, where people have classified the amount of Roman ghosts seen against, say, medieval ghosts or 17th century highwayman ghosts or anything like that? I mean, does there seem to be a predominance of people always citing Roman ghosts against other types, do you think?
Well, the ones I've come across, it seems to be the later periods have more ghosts than the Roman period. I mean, for instance, there's very few cases of people claiming to have seen ghosts from the pre-Roman period, prehistoric men. There was a case, I can't remember where it was now, but an archaeologist saw a ghost of a Bronze Age horseman that vanished near a burial mound. That's one of the earliest ghosts in Britain. People can look it up. I can't remember where it was exactly, but it was somewhere down southwest, I believe. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be as many Roman soldiers haunting sites, shall we say, as phantom monks or Victorian ladies or English Civil War soldiers hanging around Marston Moor or Naseby. So again, is it because after a while the haunting literally wears itself out? It's like an old video recording. It doesn't play anymore. I mean, for instance, there was a chap called Elliot O'Donnell, very famous ghostwriter of his day. A lot of his books are out now, again, because they're out of copyright. You can get them on Amazon. And he was an Irishman. Although he had some English blood in him. I think his mother was English. But he came up with a theory long before the stone tape that a lot of these ghosts were just recordings, and over a period of time, they would literally just fade away. Because he interviewed people in the East End of London who were around at the time of the Jack Ripper murders. And he picked up loads of stories about the murder sites being haunted. But then he said that some of them, years later, the haunting just stopped. It was like it lasted 20, 30 years, and then it sort of, faded away. So he had a theory that certain hauntings were only around for a few decades, and then boom, they were gone. So he was ahead of his time with that one. So he's worth checking out, Elliot O'Donnell. Some people accuse him of exaggerating stuff, and perhaps he did to sell books like Harry Price did, but he's a very interesting character, and, everyone should read his books.
I mean, could that be partly to do with the social kind of climate that changes over a period of 30 years? People maybe don't want to be seen as foolish if they're reporting seeing ghosts. I mean, I kind of met many interesting people that told me some fascinating stories of paranormal encounters that they wouldn't openly tell to other people.
Oh, yeah.
And it could be that over that 30-year period, although these Ripper murders or whatever ghosts are fading away, maybe there still are sighted, but people just don't want to appear to be silly, and that goes with the kind of social changes of attitudes and things as time progresses, kind of thing, you know.
Well, I mean, it could well be because Elliot O'Donnell grew up at the time when spiritualism was in its heyday.
Yeah.
And then after the First World War, when, people were desperate to contact loved ones that had been lost in that terrible war. So that could be a valid point. And also the East End has been transformed so much since the days of Jack the Ripper. There's hardly any site that hasn't been touched. I mean, Mitre Square, the original cobbles were ripped up years ago. It's unrecognisable apart from they kept the shape of the square. There's nothing apart from one building at the side, I think is still Victorian. It's been totally transformed. And I think the last site in there, Peter Underwood wrote about it in Haunted London. It was in the early 70s, and a couple saw a figure of a woman lying on the ground in what they used to call Ripper's Corner, where he murdered Catherine Eddowes. And they were going to go over to see, if she was okay, because she looked like a real person. And then a load of youths came into the square and they got a bit worried and backed off. And the youths started playing in the area where this woman had been laying, and she'd gone. So, and for instance, Mary Kelly was regarded as Jack the Ripper's last official victim in London. Where she lived, Miller's Court was supposed to be haunted, and it's supposed to be a bloody handprint on the wall that they couldn't remove, but because Miller's Court was demolished, so most of the Ripper sites have been transformed. Because I think the council, so especially in the 60s and 70s, just didn't like people going there and wanted to basically eradicate anything to do with Jack the Ripper because they thought it was in poor taste. So I know you still get Ripper walks now, but obviously the atmosphere is gone. There's very few Victorian buildings left once you go off the main streets, shall we say.
That leads me to wonder about, because I mean, my wife and I have been recently watching on Netflix documentaries and also a dramatization of Fred and Rose West, which is more recent.
No relation, I hasten to add.
Yeah, I hope not. Hope not. You never know. But I mean, that obviously happened about it was discovered in about 1994, I think, that for those that don't know, that this builder who lived at 25 Cromwell Avenue, I think it was, in Gloucestershire, along with his wife, had been responsible about, I don't know, it was like 20 odd deaths of young girls over a period of maybe from the 70s right through to the mid 90s.
A lot more, I believe.
Possibly more, yeah. Some were buried in his basement, some were buried out in the garden, and then there was, he'd obviously run out of room, and he was burying them up in the woodlands and by trees and things like that. But like you said, there could be more. Now, back in the mid-90s, my friend said, let's go there. So we went off to Gloucestershire and went to an estate agent, and in those days you had to get a map off an estate agent at the local area to try and find your way around. And we went there, and there was a policeman outside the building, and there was a few Japanese tourists, and some flowers had been laid to rest on, by the gate or something. But then sometime after that, the whole house had been knocked down, I can understand that in a way, because it probably, you might get people that want to buy it, but maybe just for the kind of novelty of owning a house of such destruction, I suppose. A very rich person. But would anyone want to move back into that house knowing the case of what's happened there? And I suspect, I do wonder if they knock the house down to kind of avoid that kind of thing, but also there might be a deeper level there where they're actually wanting to avoid things like haunting. Someone might advise the local council or the police or someone to say, knock it down because you're going to end up with hauntings in the area or something like that, because they removed all the bodies. But you never know. And certainly with these psychics that can tune into murder situations and things like that, there could be some sort of really bad energy there that's been left over but because of what's happened. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I've read a couple of books. Colin Wilson, actually, as an aside, I was involved in a series about Colin Wilson, a writer and philosopher who did loads of books on ghosts. He did a book about the West murders. And I believe that the council just wanted to knock the place down because the locals didn't want it there because they were frightened of the notoriety. that people would be going there, tourists and stuff. I've never heard that people wanted it knocked down because they were frightened it was going to be haunted. But it was just, who'd want to live there? I wouldn't want to live there because of, just the terrible things that went on there. I mean, they were evil people. And we were rightly, obviously Fred West hung himself, but, Rose West, is she still alive? I'm not sure.
Yeah, she's still in prison, I believe, yeah.
Well, let's hope she's never released because, I just think people like that are pure evil. But, so I've never heard any stories that it was demolished for that reason. This happened in the Victorian period. They would rename streets. They did with the Jack the Ripper murder sites. They would knock places down just to basically sort of erase that aspect because, you'd have sort of tourists going there, shall we say, who wanted to sort of see where horrific murder or murders have been committed. But I'm not aware of anyone's ever claimed that area is haunted. I must admit I haven't really looked into it. But yeah, I can well understand though why locals would want the house knocked down. But there again, there are other houses. I think there was in Nielsen, was he called in London? The Canary. That's it. That house is. Yeah, that's it. His house was never knocked down. And funny enough, well, it's not funny actually, but in the 80s, I used to go down. He worked in a job centre in London, almost opposite a bookshop called Murder One.
Oh God!
Which I used to go into. I used to get books on true crime. It's a very good shop, and they had like novels and things. They had Sherlock Holmes there, stuff on Jack the Ripper. But I remember walking past there and actually walking past this guy, this Nielsen, and I often wondered, did he ever go in that shop and sort of, have a wry grin, knowing that he was doing the things as well, and that one day he might be in there as a subject. But yeah, so I actually walked past him once. And I actually walked past once as well the Ipswich Strangler, who was used to hang around in the town. I worked in Ipswich at the time when those murders were going on. I can't remember the guy's name now. The one I mean, though.
I do. About 20 years ago or something, wasn't it? Or...
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was that long ago. But I remember he used to use the same video shop as me. I used to know how this video shop was legit. It was secondhand films and stuff, and he was a customer. And I asked the owner, I said, what did he ever buy from you? Assuming he was going to buy slasher films or documentaries about Jack the Ripper. And all he ever bought, apparently, was nature documentaries. So I've actually crossed paths with two serial killers, but fortunately I never ever spoke to them.
Well, that makes you wonder that we must, in an airport, in a train station, obviously someone comes to their untimely death, and they're followed or whatever might be, and there are potential killers out there. And in a sense, they're probably creating these psychic fields, if you think about it. They're creating these events that will be viewed as paranormal ghost hauntings or something at some point later. These cold case files where people pick up on spirits and see through the eyes of the murderer, that kind of sort of stuff. Have you ever gone to any seances or worked with spiritualists or gone to mediums for anything like that?
I've met the occasional medium that's come up with stuff that's quite amazing that they couldn't possibly have known. My late aunt, Doris, used to do the Ouija board. I wouldn't recommend that, by the way, because you never know what's coming through, but she was a little bit addicted to that. And I went once to a seance. I won't say where it was because I was very skeptical. It was a seance where they moved things and grabbed you and played instruments. And I was very, very skeptical about that, but I wouldn't say where because obviously some of them might be watching, but I was not impressed, shall we say. So I've met some people I've been impressed with, some that I've not been impressed with. Some are clearly cold reading, you can pick that up quite easily. Others, as I said, picked up stuff that they couldn't have possibly known. But I've been to the odd seance and stuff, but some have been impressive, but others haven't. But like I said, I don't want to name names in case I don't want to get sued.
Well, I think you should be suing them because, I went to a place in, I've been to a few places where they've had absolutely terrible seances. And the thing is, I do mediumship myself, so I'm not claiming to be the world's best medium or anything like that, but I do know that the phenomena works. I'm not a physical medium. I'm not going to make instruments fly or play or anything like that, but I do know the phenomenon works. Um, I've done readings on people where I've been blindfolded, stood in a corner, and I've had to have someone confirm a yes or no through an intermediary. So I never heard even the person's voice that I was doing the reading on tell me yes or no. It had to be done through a second person who was then relaying it back to me. And I was picking up more psychic information about them rather than life after death information. So I was picking up like their vehicle, the diet they'd been on, and they'd had some work done to something or something like that, or been on various things. So I do know that it works, but I do also know that there are lots of fakes out there.
Definitely.
Not so much on the mental mediumship side. That's your clairvoyance, that's your Tony Stockwells, your Colin Fry's and people like that. But it's more when you're having the more spectacular mediumship demonstrations where it's called physical mediumship, and that's where, like, you claim you thought they were trying to do instruments being played and that kind of thing. Yeah, and I've attended things where drums were being played, and a little girl who was from France was supposedly coming through. She sounded like a voice of the Tweenies. If you remember the Tweenies, the BBC Kids characters, that's what it sounded like. So I thought it was an old man doing a voice, you know.
It could be the same one, because I went to this particular thing and it was supposed to be a child, and it was so obvious that the medium was just trying to speak like a child. And then, you know, they wouldn't have the lights on for when the stuff was moving around, which, you know, oh, that's convenient. But then they could put the lights on when the door of the cabinet where this person was placed would sort of push out and then in. And I was not impressed, because I thought, well, look, if they don't need the lights on to do, if they need, you know, you can have the lights on to do that, why couldn't they have the lights on when the trumpet's playing by itself? Yeah. And I just thought, you know, again, I won't name where it is, but I just thought, how can people fall for this stuff?
Well, I wrote about it in my book. If it's the same one, I'll say the name myself. I don't mind. I don't mind, because they can try and sue me, but then they'll have a problem. They'll have to prove their claims in court of what they can do.
Exactly.
You see, I don't think they're likely to do. But it was I went to a Christmas tree seance, I think, or Christmas seance with a guy called Bill Meadows, I think, and he was an Irish guy. Very old Irish one then. Okay, very old Irish guy. It's a Christmas tree seance taking place in Oxfordshire. I don't blame the people that ran the place. I don't think they were fully aware that they were also possibly being defrauded. But, you know, the presents would be thrown out during the darkness, and it was supposedly from spirit children or something. And that's, what was the other thing that that's right, they had this French girl supposedly talking against the cabinet, which was basically a curtain in front of a box, and you could see what looked like a child's shape, but they could easily made that, I'm sure. They were doing this fake voice and things like that. And in fact, I do remember talking to one guy who said he'd gone to a seance where this French spirit appeared and they were talking, so he decided to speak back in French.
Oh, I bet.
And he started asking questions in French, and they suddenly had to go back to the spirit world.
I bet. It reminds me if there's an adaptation of one of the M.R. James, where this guy turns up and this chap's possessed by a medieval monk, and he starts to speak Norman French, and the monk doesn't know what to say. And he said, well, that's surprising. You know, you'd be able to speak that fluently. Have you forgotten how to speak that in the spirit world? And Treasure of Abbot Thomas, if people want to watch it. It's on YouTube. It's very good. Good adaptation. Cool. Recommend it.
Now, you also write for Psychic News magazine, which is where I've seen some of your articles.
I do. I'll hold one up for you. I'll just get it. I was expecting that. So this is an old issue, but I write every month for them. Those stories, ones that have supposedly happened.
Oh, nice.
There you go. Yeah, about psychic dogs. So yeah, every month. The current one, I've got an article on Pluckley in Kent, which is supposed to be the most haunted village in England. I know other villages claim that they're the most haunted, but I don't want to cause a scrap between them. I've been writing for them now, for over 10 years. Got 3 ghost books out, as I mentioned before: Britain's Haunted Land, Britain's Ghostly Heritage, and Britain's Haunted Heritage. And I've got a book coming out on poltergeists as well, hopefully this year. And that's also been turned into a documentary, which will be directed by my friend and colleague Jason Figgis. And I'm plugging myself now. I've also co-written a documentary on Jack the Ripper with a chap called Mike Hawley, again directed by Jason Figgis. We've got the Colin Wilson series, which we're hoping to get streaming and service to take on, and that will cover the paranormal as well. He's interested in that. So I've been doing quite a lot. So I don't think that's a ghost, by the way, when the light goes on. I think that's just the camera getting confused. Could be a poltergeist, though. Could be a poltergeist.
What do you think a poltergeist is? I mean, we hear stories it's angry ghosts. That's where the term comes from in German, noisy ghosts or something. What do you think they are?
Well, my book, I come to the conclusion that they might be different things. So, I mean, the old theory was that it was psychic energy from a teenage girl, entering puberty, and it was manifesting itself in various ways because they were frustrated because of the onset of puberty. But I've come across cases where it's affected boys, women entering the menopause, elderly men. So I think, and I used to think it was just literally perhaps the psychic energy, and Colin Wilson used to think this, but now I've come to the conclusion it's possibly some sort of entity, a spirit that latches on to this energy and then manifests itself. Now, whether it's some sort of evil spirit that doesn't want to move on, there's another theory that it's actually that we're made up of different personalities, shall we say, and that when we pass on, our higher self moves on, and our lower baser instincts break away and become a poltergeist, and that's why they call all this mayhem and trouble. There are other theories that it's entities from another dimension. It's funny I'm talking about this and then the screen keeps going on, isn't it? So it could be just a coincidence. I hope it is. And but entities from another dimension that have come into ours. So I think there could be different explanations. I don't think it's something, again, you can pigeonhole and say, oh, yes, it's the psychic energy of a teenage girl. I think there's a lot more to it than that. But I'm quite taken with the idea that perhaps when we pass on, that aspects of our personality perhaps break away. As I said, the baser instincts, and they sort of gradually fizzle out and fade away, but they're sort of wandering around and latch on to anything where they can manifest themselves. I could be totally wrong. It could be something else. But it's a very interesting subject, and I don't think we're going to ever get to the bottom of it. They've been talking about it for centuries.
They manifest in different ways, but I mean, there's common kind of things that seem to connect a lot of them, which is like throwing of objects, or starting of small fires.
Oh yes, the stages.
Kind of thing.
The stages, they start off with you hear knocks and bangs, scratches. You think it's an animal in the wall. Then they start to try to communicate, and first it's barks and growls, then it's articulate. They latch on to a focus person. There's normally one person that they concentrate on. They perhaps might speak through them. They start fires. They make allegations about things going on in the household, claim to be a murder victim, the devil, an angel, whatever. You know, they normally take on the guise of whatever the person expects them to be. I've just written an article on Jeff, the talking mongoose poltergeist, and that claimed to be an animal. But there again, the family thought originally it was an animal, so did it just take on that guise to please them? And then eventually it'll fizzle out and move on, or just, fade away. But there again, there's exceptions to the rule. There's a place called Dagworth Hall in Suffolk, which Alan Murdy, who's involved with the poltergeist documentary that we're doing, came across. And there was poltergeist activity reported in the medieval period, and it was still being reported in the 1960s. So again, there's a theory that some of these poltergeists are place-centered and not people-centered. And they're linked to ley lines, earth energies, things like that. So, and there's also poltergeists that seem to be connected to objects. I've come across cases where there was a wardrobe where poltergeist activity only occurred around that, or a human skull. So again, you can't sort of pigeonhole this into one particular, category and say poltergeists are this. So it's a puzzling subject. And
it's interesting you mentioned the wardrobe, though, the activity centered around the wardrobe, because it seems to me that's reminiscent of a psychic medium's cabinet, a develop seance trance cabinet or physical medium seance cabinet. Because in my research is that a lot of ghosts that I've it tends to be spirits rather than ghosts. In other words, people that have departed this world, they tend to be seen by the people that I've read about or talked to. They tend to be seen in doorways or in window frames, and that kind of tallied up a little bit once I saw this documentary where this guy was in one of the most haunted houses in Scotland, and he was working on his computer, and he said he felt a presence watching him from the doorway behind him. And they called in this sort of paranormal research team, and they went in with their little detectors of electromagnetic frequencies and stuff like that. And they said there's a lot of electromagnetic energy in this building, but they said it's particularly very strong around this doorway, which was the doorway in question behind the guy. And that even started making me think, that's interesting. So my theory is, and again, it extends into the feng shui, don't move the building around because it'll all disappear, is that these constructions of doorways help in some way focus the energy, rather like a spirit in a seance cabinet will come out and walk about. It helps the energy condense and form in some way, whether it becomes a physical person, it might become a noise or a manifestation of some sort. And so you talk about that cupboard there suggests that it could have some kind of sort of connection, I think. Are you familiar at all with the Doddleston mystery?
Oh, that one. Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, refresh my memory because I've.
So this happened in about 1984, and it was this old cottage in the village of Doddleston. We're drawing to a close here. We've got about 5 minutes left.
I better promote the Ghost Chronicles series before we go as well.
So it's a village in Doddleston, just on the Welsh border, and this teacher borrowed an old the early BBC microcomputers at the time.
I remember
the
it
internet.
now. Yeah,
And
yeah, the book came out about it, didn't it?
That's right, yeah.
From the Tudor period or something.
Yeah, a guy from the Tudor times called Lucas who was communicating through this computer. But initially, that started off with poltergeist activity, cans of baked beans being snacked, noises upstairs, that kind of thing. But it manifested in a very unique way, which is communicating through his computer, which I thought was very interesting. And
he referred to some sort of strange box that he'd been given by someone.
Box of lights from the year, from a future being from 2035 or 2135 or something like that. Yeah,
there was a documentary made about it on BBC. I think it's on YouTube actually. Yes, it is on YouTube.
Yeah, Strange but True, or
that's what I was it. Strange but True. I think it was that one.
I read the book called The Vertical Plane. Very interested in. And the people that are involved in it, they don't really like to talk about it too much. They're still around, Ken Webster and his partner, but they're not out grabbing the limelight, but they still maintain it's true, which is interesting. So as we draw to a close now, if you wanted to tell us about your books and if people want to contact you via your website, how they can do that and things.
Yes, it's johnwestmedia.com. My books, Britain's Haunted Land, Britain's Ghostly Heritage, Britain's Haunted Heritage, are available from the publisher's website, JMD Media. They're on Amazon. Psychic News is available in most good news agents, WH Smiths, like that, places like that. I'm also doing this TV pilot, the Ghost Chronicles, with Jason Figgis and an Australian paranormal team. I've written the names down so I don't forget. Dan Rickard, Pete Casaletto, and Angelo Accardi. And we're going to York to film this. We're going to look into several haunted locations, and it will be premiered by Ghostflix TV in Germany, and hopefully it'll be a series leading on from that. I suggested using York because it's supposed to be the most haunted city after London. It's got 140 ghosts at the last count, and we will be going to Marston Moor, which is outside of York, but that's a haunted battlefield, and we were looking at the Golden Fleece pub and hopefully some other haunted locations, including hopefully the Roman Bath. We can't get into the Treasurer's House because the cellar's closed at the moment because of asbestos. Unfortunately, we won't be able to investigate that one, but so that will be coming out. And say they're Australia's top paranormal team. Angela was involved with an organisation called Spirit Crew Australia, and Dan and Pete were with Night Watchers Paranormal, so they're very well respected. And obviously Jason Figgis, the director, is very well respected, and I've worked with him before. and we're hoping it's going to be sort of well received. It's not going to be like some of these other ghost hunting shows where we're running around screaming at every bang and using Ouija boards to conjure up God knows what. We didn't really want to go down that route. I think it's been overdone, shall we say.
Yes, yeah. Okay, that's brilliant. So when's the first series of anything going to come on, say, Amazon or Netflix that we can look out for?
Well, the Ghost Chronicles will be filmed in September, so hopefully, I mean, obviously Josen's got to edit it, but that will be premiered on Ghostflix and then hopefully on other streaming services end of this year, beginning of next.
Right.
The Poltergeist is going to be direct made this year, so again, that'll be next year though before it's out.
Okay.
Same with the Jack the Ripper and the Colin Wilson series. I'm chatting with streamers now, so hopefully these will be out the end of this year, beginning of next. I've also written a documentary on Bram Stoker called Father of Dracula, which again will be made this year, but that will be out next year, and that's just about his life and how he was inspired to write Dracula. And I look into the folklore surrounding vampirism, and Dacre Stoker, the descendant of Bram Stoker, supplied me with a lot of material, which was a great help. So yeah, I've been keeping busy basically.
Wow.
So,
Wow, good stuff. All right.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your time, John West.
Pleasure.
Researcher, actor, ghost extraordinaire researcher, and all the other things. You've been watching the Paranormal Peep Show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And stay tuned for further programs in the network, and we shall see you next month. Good night.
goodbye.